Okay, so I'm going to do a video here on animation. This is going to include bones, mesh skinning, plus several other different things, keyframes and whatever else. Now, most of the time for basic, simplistic kind of animations, this can be done directly in the XML of the Placeable. You just set up your different tags with your animations and the appropriate keyframes. So for example, you can have something like just a door, for example. So if I do something like, let's see here, if I do SY, make this a bit smaller, SC, make it a bit bigger, and then I would just basically have an origin point somewhere here, for example, and then I would rotate this, so I'd just do RZ, rotate it by however much, and that's my door, okay? Which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a very quick and easy way to do animations, and a very good way to do animations within Farming Simulator 22, 19, 17, whatever else. It's been used for the longest of times in different ways, either with separate XMLs or integrated coding within the Placeable XML, which is now the sort of norm as far as that goes. The normal way of doing things: you create your XML or your Placeable, and then inside that XML you would have the animations built into it directly, unlike previous versions where you would actually have an animated XML which would be part of your map and so on and so on. As things have progressed with Placeables becoming quite a key thing within Farming Simulator, well, I say 19 and 22, more so 22. Everything is generally based around the placeable mechanics of the game, so which is great. It allows for many different things to occur, better things to occur, outside of the map itself. You're not having to build things directly within the map, and then you can have a lot more options available to you, I guess. But there are times when you have certain animations or certain objects that you want to animate that become more complicated in the way they work, that can be either impossible or very difficult to actually create directly within the XML itself. Trying to work out exactly what part needs to be where, as in the keyframe and the rotation, translation, and so on and so on, that could be quite time consuming. And for most things, you would have to make the changes in the XML, then load it into the game to actually see whether that setup has worked correctly. And it's a lot of backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, trying to make small incremental changes and add in different keyframes here, there, and everywhere to do certain things. And that could be just, a nightmare, let's say. So with mesh skinning, you can actually create, and obviously bones and animations with the keyframes directly here in Blender, or potentially Maya. You can actually see what's going on more visually, and make your changes as you're working on it directly. So if I make a change here and it doesn't quite work, I can literally straight away adapt it to make it work without having to load things into the game and then exit back out, make a change, go back into the game, exit out, so on and so on. It's all very visual based, which is great. I'm a very visual person, so I like to see things actually working and then make my changes as I need to right there and then. So I mean, there's lots of different ways to do this, but mesh skinning does allow for, I guess, an easier method. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I'm going to basically put all this together, and then hopefully as I go through this and we get to the end of it, things will make more sense. And the reason why this is a really good way of doing it, in my opinion at least, when it comes to the more complex animations. Now, this by far is not a complex animation. There are far more complex animations that can be made up, but as far as actually creating the coding in the XML, this is far more complicated than I would want to actually write it in XML. I can do it here visually and just have it dynamically loaded into the Placeable, and then, you know, clone what basically is going to be part of the main object, and replace that with the animated part. Again, hopefully as we go through this, that will become clearer. So I've got a door, obviously, and it has this mechanical door opener on it, which, because this is a steel door, would be a steel door. It's quite a heavy door, so it has this mechanical opener assist device that when you open the door, it you know, helps you move the door, the heavy door sort of thing. And again, when you're closing it, it closes at a nice steady speed, not slams closed, whatever else. You know, so that's a really good kind of thing. This is a double door, obviously. Now, you know, there's, you know, it's not the best of kind of designs, you know, as far as things go. There are things that I would like to add in and whatever else to make it more visually appealing, but you know, you have to kind of weigh up the odds between, you know, geometry and poly count and whatever else, because this alone is over 5,000 triangles to make all this up. So you have to kind of, you know, get to a point and say, you know, that's about as high poly as I would want the door to be. Now, potentially I could reduce this down dramatically, you know, by having certain parts, like for example here, each of the hinge parts here are a separate hinge part. I could join all of those together and just have it as one piece, and then give the illusion of certain things rotating and whatever else. But I actually want it to be this way. So like, you know, you would have this piece, let's say this piece and this piece as part of the frame, and then this piece and this piece would be part of the door, or vice versa, whichever way you wanted to play that. So, you know, I want it to actually have it where certain parts don't move, certain parts do move, and whatever else. I mean, you know, as far as that goes, if you're looking at the door itself, chances of you actually seeing this piece rotate with the door is slim, and chances are you would never even look at it. But, you know, that's the way I want it to be. You can decide what you want from there. But, and again, you know, there's lots of different things. You could make certain parts here lower poly and, you know, whatever else. But, again, this is the way I want it to be. So this is what I'm going to have. So basically here, what we need to do is create the mesh skinning process with the bones. Now in Blender, it's a little bit different to Maya. Maya uses joints, and then you group your joints together to create your hierarchy and whatever else. In Blender, it's an armature which is made up of a series of bones, which you parent the bones in a specific hierarchy to make things do what you want to do. And then when you export that out into an i3D, the armature itself plus the bones get converted into transform groups. Again, that's something we'll get to a bit later on. But when you look at something like this, it can be a little bit kind of daunting, if that's the right word to use, on how to set things up and make them work, and how the process of it getting out of Blender into the Giants engine and whatever else. Now, this is going to be something which is we've never had before, and kudos to Giants to actually, you know, for creating a proper, fully featured i3D exporter for us. This is something that I've been wanting for a very, very long time. We've always had an official Giants i3D exporter, but even though all the boxes were here, it's been very stripped down. It's literally just been an exporter with, so you can get the correct i3D and shapes file, but it's had none of the additional features like mesh skinning, animations, and so on included. So, you know, again, kudos to Giants for actually getting this now fully functional for Blender. So you will need this to make all this work. You can get this from the Giants Developer Network. I'll put a link in the description. You will need to create a user account. It's completely free. Just go on, sign up, and it'll, I think you get an email, if I remember correctly, with a password in your email, and that will then give you access to the Giants Developer Network. There's loads of information on there about all sorts of different things, plus things that you can download, including the official Giants i3D exporter. Now, I am using Blender version 3.5.1. As far as I am aware, all of these features for the Giants i3D exporter work. The only thing that you will not have in any version above 2.93 is the material, the vehicle material array. This does not work as far as I can tell, in any version higher than 2.93, any variation of 2.93. So I think the last version of 2.93 was 2.9317 that I know of. I haven't checked in a while, but I have it here. I have two versions of Blender running, so if I do need to use the vehicle material array tool, I will load up this version 2.93.17 to make this work. But something to do with the Python coding changed in 3.0 and up, and this no longer works. Be nice if Giants would actually update the exporter tools for later versions of Blender, but I understand why it's quite a task to take on, I would imagine, to rewrite the Python coding for those changes when, you know, 2.93 point whatever works perfectly fine. So, you know, they've got other things to do with DLCs and God knows what else, you know, upgrades to the engine and some, you know, changes to the game or whatever else. They've got enough going on, I guess, that they don't have time to do that just yet, but that may come in the future, who knows. But everything, you know, again, kudos, we have got it, so, you know, we do have something that works at least. But this version of Blender has a few things that make, you know, things a little easier to work with, I guess, over 2.93, and it tends to run a bit smoother, at least for me. So that's what I'm going to be running. But you can run whatever version you want to run, as long as it supports the i3D exporter. This was created for 2.93 version of Blender, so you would need obviously that version or higher to get this to work. I think there are third-party versions of this out there, but I would always recommend to use the official Giants i3D exporter from the Giants Developer Network where you can. So yeah, we've got the door then, and we're going to basically put all the parts together to create our armature set and bones, and then we'll be parenting this all together for the mesh skin process and so on and so on. So what I'm going to do is select my door collection here so that when I create my armature, it actually puts it inside this group or this collection. If you don't have a collection selected when you create a new object or anything else, it will just, on most cases, it will just put it anywhere. Sometimes it will actually, because this was the last collection that I selected, it's actually put it in there for me. But I always make sure that I've got the collection that I want whatever I'm creating or adding to be put into that collection and not another collection or anywhere outside of a collection. So I'm going to select the collection, and then I'm going to have my cursor on the origin point of the object. So if it's, for example, over here, just do, in my case, Shift S, and I have this pie menu because I'm using various different add-ons. But you should have something similar to this, and you just do cursor to selected, and it will then put the cursor to wherever the origin point of that particular, or in this case, it will put the cursor to the selected, wherever the cursor is. You know, it will put the cursor to the origin point of the selected object, basically. But anyway, yeah, so now I've got my cursor where I want it to be, I'm just going to do Shift A, and I'm going to Armature. Now I'm running, again, several different add-ons. These do come with Blender for the human meta rig, animals, and basics. But if you don't see anything like this, don't worry about it, because by default, when you click Armature, it will create a single bone for you. Because I have all this other stuff running, it gives me the option to create a single bone here. But as soon as you click on Armature, it will just create a single bone for you, because that's basically what an armature is made up of, single bones. So we're just going to click single bone here in this case, and it will create my armature group with my first bone inside of it. Okay. Now, if you don't see your bone very clearly, you can come over to the object data properties here, or object properties, and you can come down to viewport display, and under here just click in front, and that will then bring it to the front. It doesn't matter what angle you're looking at it, it will just basically bring it to the front. I think it's kind of some sort of X-ray mode. It just makes it kind of visible through other objects, but you know, However it works, it doesn't matter. It does what I need it to do. So you click in front and now you can see the bone more clearly. Now I'm going to scale this bone down because it doesn't need to be that big. So again, in my case, I'm going to hit tab and go to edit mode, but you can come up here and just go edit mode here. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to hit tab, go to edit mode, select my tail. So this is the head, this is the tail. I'm just going to do GZ and just drag it down to make it a bit smaller. Okay. So this is going to be my root bone. So I'm just going to go into edit mode again. With my bone selected, I'm going to press F2 and I'm just going to type in a root. You can type in whatever you want, doesn't matter. So we'll go back to object mode, and then I need to kind of position bones where I need them to be. So I'm going to do one door at a time here. So we'll start with this one on the left. So I'm going to select the mesh, the object, and again I'll hit tab and I'm going to go into edit mode, face select. I'm going to turn all this other stuff off here so you can't see that. It just gets in the way. And I'm going to come into here, and then I will turn on screencast keys here actually, so you can actually see what I'm pressing. Something like that will do. And then I'm going to press Alt A to make sure I've got nothing selected. And I'm going to do C for circle select. I'm just going to click those faces there. I'm going to come to the bottom here. And again, I'm going to press C, make my circle a bit smaller with the mouse wheel. And then I'm going to press C for selecting those faces. Shift S and cursor to face. Go back into object mode, select my bone, into edit mode, and I'm going to do Shift A. This will automatically bring in a new bone. So I'm going to do Control 3 for left orthographic. Again, I'm going to select the tail of the bone, G, Z, and just bring this down. Doesn't need to be as big as that, so I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. We'll go back into object mode. There's a lot of backwards and forwards here between the mesh and the bones to make this work. But it is what it is. So we'll go to perhaps maybe the door handle here. So I'm just going to come in here and we'll go select the mesh again, go into edit mode, face select. And I'm going to do Alt click on this one. Now you need to make sure in this case that this, even though this door handle is part of the door handle cover, these cannot be connected to this. So you need to make sure that when you move it, it doesn't move any of these other faces or this other geometry. Otherwise, when you actually rotate the door, this will become distorted. It will try to rotate with it. So you need to make sure that it's actually not connected. If it is connected, for example, so if I was to perhaps maybe select, if I go into face mode, select these and do M, merge by distance. So now if I was to select this, you can see this moves with it. If that is the case, you need to go into here, select the group or the loop of those edges with Alt click, and then press V to rip. And that will then basically rip them away from the other ones. And then just right click to cancel the move. Now this will be a separate part, okay? Even though it is actually part of this geometry, they are all one object, they are not connected up. So they do have their own separate edges and vertices. And that's important because otherwise, if you don't do that, as I say, when you rotate the door handle, it will actually try to move the additional geometry here, and it will just distort it and put it all out of whack and make it look stupid. So you need to make sure that it's not connected up in any way. So I'm going to do Alt click on these ones, these faces, and Alt click on these, Shift S to face, and this will then put my cursor here. And then again, I'm going to select my bones, go into edit mode, Shift A to create a new bone. So I'm going to do Control 3 for left orthographic. And I want to rotate this bone to the door handle. So I'm going to come up to here and set my pivot point to the 3D cursor. I'm going to show you why that's important. If I select my bone and do rotate, it's going to rotate on its median point currently. Okay, because that's what it's got. It's set to up here. It's set to median point. But I actually want it to rotate on the head of the bone. So I'm going to come to here and go to 3D cursor. Now when I rotate this on the X axis, it will rotate in the correct point. So I'm going to rotate this by 90, minus 90. I'm going to select the tail, G, and this will be on the Y axis. And I'm going to make this smaller, about the same size as the door handle itself. Doesn't really matter, it can be, you know, whatever you want it to be, but roughly about the same size as the door handle, right? So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to create another one for the actual latch part here. So we're going to go back into object mode, select the mesh, going to go into edit mode, edge select, and I'm going to do this one, shift select this one, shift S, and then cursor to edge. So I'm going to select my bone, go back into edit mode, and shift A, which will now create a new bone. And again, I want my pivot point to be on the 3D cursor. So when I select the bone here, I can do RX and rotate this by 90. Okay. And then I can take this, the tail of the bone, GY, and then bring it back to wherever I want it to be. So again, wherever you want it to be, I want it to be somewhere about here will be fine. Okay, I don't want my bones to be all overlapping. Otherwise, it's very difficult to select them afterwards. But make them, you know, appropriate size so that you can actually still select them and see them and all that sort of stuff. So we'll do that. That's fine. And then I'm going to do the parts up here for the actual door opener mechanism part. So I'm going to, let's see here. If I select the mesh, we'll go into edit mode. So I'm going to do edge here. Do I want edge? Yeah, we can do, actually I'll do face. I think I'll do face. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to click here and I'm going to do numpad period to do a focus on this area. And I'm just going to do C for circle select, and I'm just going to select all of these faces like so. Right click to cancel, shift S, cursor to face. We'll go back into object mode, select my bone, go into edit mode, shift A to add a new bone. And then I want to put this over here. The tail of the bone I want to be over here. I'm going to go back into object mode, select the mesh, go into edit mode. Again, I can do this however I want to do this, but I'm going to show you why this is important to have everything level where you want it to be. So I'm going to do is in here, alt click on those, shift S to face, and select my bone here, go into edit mode, select the tail, and then I'm going to right click, snap, selection to cursor. Now, when I look at this, you can see this has kind of got a tilt to it. So if I come over to my armature set here, in the right hand side here, go to armature properties, and I go to viewport display and turn on axes, you can see the axes of this Z axis here is not straight up and down. It's got a bit of a tilt to it, and that's not going to work properly, because when I skin the bone to this part of the mesh, what's going to happen when I rotate this piece here, if I go into here and do L on that, do it in edge mode. If I go into here, when I rotate the bone, what's going to happen is this piece here is going to rotate and be all like kind of off kilter. It's not going to rotate properly. Potentially it could be, you know, let's say for example, if I do something, it could end up being like that. It's not going to rotate correctly. And that's obviously not going to work properly. I want it to rotate on a flat axis, you know, so it rotates correctly. So we need to kind of make some changes here to the bone to make sure that they are flat, so it doesn't have this kind of tilt on the Z axis. So what I'm going to do is, before I move anything, now what I could possibly do here is there's lots of different ways you can do this. One of them, what I could do is to create a part here or whatever, you know, and then move this to that. There's many different ways you can do this. So possibly what I could do here is to, because I've got my cursor here, I could do Shift A and then create an empty. Okay, and then if I go back to my bone, I could go into edit mode, select this, And with vertex snapping on, I could do GZ and then snap it to that point. But it's very difficult to do that with all of this other rubbish going on inside of here. The way that I generally do this is if I get rid of that, because I've got my cursor here, I can go into here, go to view, and this will show me the location of my 3D cursor. So I've got my Z-axis on my cursor, so I can copy this from here on the Z-axis, go to my bone, go into edit mode, select this, go back to item, and then paste that value in here. Now I know that that is the same height as my cursor, and it's going to be the same height as the tail of the bone. So if I go back into here, you can now see my Z-axis is pointing straight up and down, which is how I want it to be. That's the way that I generally do those sorts of things. So we're going to create a new bone here. So I'm going to go back into object mode, select the mesh, go back into edit mode, face select, and we'll come to here. So I'm just going to click on this, alt click on those faces, shift S to face, go back into object mode, select my bone, edit mode, shift A, create a new bone, back into object mode. And what I will do here is, let's see, yeah, so what I'll do is actually I'm going to go into edit mode, select the tail of this bone, shift S to selected, and then I can take this one in edit mode, select this one, and snap that to the 3D cursor. Okay. They should now be all on the same height, so we should be good there. Always good to check these sorts of things. So now you click on them, because this one is slightly lower than this one. You want them all to be, in this particular scenario, all the same height, because otherwise, again, you're going to have certain parts which are not going to work correctly, in my opinion. So you can kind of choose which one you want to be where. I think what I will do is make this one the same height as this one. So I'm going to select the tail of this one, and we'll just do Control Z, select the tail of that one, Control V, okay? And these ones over here I know are all going to be the correct height because I've selected the, I snapped them to the correct position. So now when I rotate those, they're not going to have any discomparity or whatever the word is, you know, between them. So I shouldn't have any kind of issues with mesh drooping and not, you know, aligning up correctly and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take this bone and hide it, and I'm going to select the tail of this one, 7 on numpad to go into top down orthographic, and with the tail of this one selected, I'm going to do E, X, and just drag this out a little bit. And I'm going to have a new bone here. This one is going to be a child of this one, and it will become more apparent why I've got that in a moment when we actually set everything up. So now that we've got all of that set up, we need to kind of do the same for the other door. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to create all of those bones for the other door, and then we'll come back to, you know, getting all the other stuff set up.